Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. I'm Jean James, if people have forgotten who I am, from the Canberra Jung Society. Thank you for joining us again here at MacKillop House and online. Let us first acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Well, it looks as though we survived the AGM. We had that last time again. Thank you for our new committee, particularly for Kirsten as the Vice President in her new role, and Karen, our new committee member. It's always good to have some new people coming. Dorothy is still on the committee, but she said that she doesn't want to be anything more than just on the committee, so she's happy with it. This evening, we're delighted to welcome Sonia Di Mezza. We know Sonia really well because she sings in our church and speaks and does everything. Really amazing lady. Sonia's everywhere. Yeah. And we love our Sonia. And recently, she spoke in the National Library of Australia to an enthusiastic audience of 250. So, Sonia, we will like that tonight. No. Sonia is a human rights lawyer, solicitor, and the Interim CEO of the Migrant Refugee Settlement Services, MARS, and has held numerous other leadership and advocacy roles. She's a co-author of a book called Lovesick, which has been made into a Netflix documentary film about her Indian friend's contraction of the HIV virus in an arranged marriage. So that sounds like an exciting book. If you're here on Zoom, please remain muted while Sonia is speaking. Use Zoom chat for comments and we'll open up later for discussion. Following Sonia's presentation, we'll have a short break, so supper, cup of tea, and a little discussion, and then later questions. Finishing by 10 p.m. We'll see how we go. We could finish even earlier. Note that we'll be recording this event for later reference. Thank you, Sonia. It's great to have you tonight. It's just wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for that warm introduction. I have 45 minutes, is that right? Oh, okay. Let's see how we go. No. I'm one of those people who can speak underwater. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. Let me just get this ready. So I'm going to talk tonight on this topic, building our nation, how migrants and their children have shaped Australia. So I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today, the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri peoples, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. The other day I was in an op shop, which I like to go to a lot of op shops, and I found this, which I bought, which is pink stick. Pink is my favourite colour. And I asked my friend what it was, and she said, because it's obviously something Indigenous, she said it's a message stick. And when Australia is full of different countries, when someone would go to a different country to bring a message from another community, they would also bring this message stick. So I'm bringing the message about my father's migration story, and I will just leave this stick here. Now, this presentation was created for the library, and so I put this acknowledgement of the builders that went before me, including my father, Guido Di Mezza, who helped build the library in which I gave the presentation. They obviously didn't build this building, but that's to explain why that slide's in there. So what I'm going to speak about today, that's a picture of my father, Guido Di Mezza, the story of migration through his life. And not only that, but really exploring the contribution that migrants and their children have made and continue to make and shape and influence Australia. I want to talk about the identity of migrants as Australians because there seems to be a lot of othering about migrants, and also the role that each and every one of us here today can play to support migrants to settle in Australia. As Jean said, after the nibbly bit, we'll have a question time. You can ask me any questions or approach me. And there was an exhibition, which is obviously not linked to this, but I'll tell you about that later. So what happened, how this whole lecture came into being, I was driving along towards my house, and there were these signs all along. What's that big, past the Arboretum, that big road? I don't know. Thank you, Tuggeranong Parkway, and places near my house in Mawson. There was this big sign that said "Hopes and Fears, Australian Migration Stories." And I kept seeing this poster, and it was about this exhibition on migrants that the National Library of Australia was showing. And I remember thinking, back when Dad was alive, he used to say, I helped build the library. My dad was a plasterer, so he just told us that. That's all I know. And so I rang up the library and I said, look, are you giving an exhibition on migrants? And they said, yes. I said, well, my father was one of the builders of your library. And they go, really? And I said, yes. And I also happen to be the CEO of the Migrant Refugee Settlement Services. So could I come and give a talk about that? Rather than just having an exhibition, having the voice, the children speak about their parents' stories, I think can be a bit powerful. So they were really generous and they agreed to it. And they were really pleasantly surprised because like 3/4 of our church at Wesley showed up. It was like 236 people, and they said, we haven't seen so many people. So it was really fantastic, and it's nice to have something a little bit more intimate here tonight. Thank you for inviting me. So who am I? My name is Sonia Di Mezza. I was born in Sydney in Australia in 1972, so I'm 53 in a couple of weeks. I'm the CEO, no longer the interim CEO. I think you dug up something from the internet, but thank you for finding that. CEO of the Migrant and Refugee Settlement Services, also known as Mars. My staff likes to joke. Welcome to Planet Mars. So we provide services and supports to people from refugee and migrant backgrounds who want to settle in the Canberra region. We might give them housing, help them with housing, employment, how to learn to drive a car, English classes. My professional background over 28 years is as a human rights lawyer and solicitor, and I've set up some human rights projects in Pakistan for Afghan widowed women, Sudan, a legal aid project, I worked for UNHCR in Lebanon, and a child rights NGO in India. And I also worked as a refugee lawyer in immigration detention centres in Australia. So who was my dad? Here's a picture of my dad. I think it's very James Dean. I really like this photo. His name was Guido Di Mezza. He was born in 1932. So if he had have lived, he'd be like, how old would he be now? 93, yeah. I was hoping he'd live into his 90s, but wanted to be. Anyway, he came via the assisted passenger scheme. You might know it as the the £10 POMs. Like you had to pay £10. You had to stay in Australia for 2 years. If you went back, you had to pay it back, but no one ever went back. So he came on that scheme. They initially started with a lot of English people, and then they went to Southern Europe, to Italy and Greece and other places. He told me he had £1 in his pocket. He was 30 when he arrived by himself. He came from the Campania region of Italy, Benevento. His original trade was as a carpenter. It was later in Australia he learned about plastering, installing ceilings, and that's what he went on to do. And he was one of the builders of the National Library of Australia. Put that picture in there, Galliano or Sambuca. We used to drink a lot of it in the 80s. I didn't realise, but that comes from the Benevento region where my dad was from. That's a little link. And I know that your focus with Jung, I don't know a lot about his theories and philosophies, but Robert kindly sent me some information, and there are underlying aspects of trauma So I will kind of bring them to light in my presentation tonight for you. So this is a picture of my mum. She arrived in 1955 when she was 21 years old on the Oronsay. That was her cruise liner. She was a seamstress, or in those days, all the women had to learn how to sew and prepare their dowry for when they got married. So that beautiful dress she's wearing, she made it with her sisters. She used to sew cushions for factories. I remember as a little child playing at her feet when my brother and sister were at school. I was the youngest, and she'd be sewing cushion pieces for factories from home. So she was doing remote work before that was even a thing. She was a very small woman. She was about up to my shoulder. The reason why she was so small, the rest of the family, her family were quite tall. But I believe at the time when they grew up in that part of Italy, it was after the war and they went through, you know, really hard times. They didn't have a lot of food to eat. And so I believe that could have stunted her growth. And I found out later that you can genetically inherit small stature as a result of malnutrition. I don't know if she suffered malnutrition, but they didn't have a lot of food. And that's why I think a lot of Southern Italian women are very small. So, you know, I'm quite small, but she was up to my shoulder. She was a very small woman, but she was very strong in character and very kind and really, really concerned about people and a very religious Catholic woman. So I got my Catholicism and also my passion for social justice, I believe, from my mum. And there is a saying by someone called Randy Pouch. I don't know if I'm saying his name properly. It's not about the cards you are dealt with, but how you play the hand. We don't have control over what cards we get, but we can control how you play the hand. And I believe that even though she had a difficult start in life, she played the hand well. This is the town of Formicola where she came from. It's a very, very beautiful town. And me, my brother and sister, we've inherited a house and I go there every year when I have a board meeting in Europe. And it's nested in a valley. And it used to have a population 2,500. Sadly, it's probably about 1.5 now, because a lot of the young people have gone off to the north of England and other places to get work. The south of Italy has a real unemployment problem. Italy's best kept secret Formicola, population 1,457, sorry. Yep, it dates back to the 12th century and it was ruled by a prince who lived there. I'd like to show you some photos I took of Formicola. In the inner part of the town, the roads are so small, they're obviously only built for horse and carriage. So that is the reason, if you go to Italy, do you notice Italians drive those little Fiats? That's because you can't get those big American cars and SRVs around. Some of the roads are so small. And I can just imagine a little horse and cart down there. Here's another photo I took. There's about 3 churches in this little town. As the sun was setting, put a filter on that. This is one of my favourite points in the town. That little bridge, that little moat thing, it was bombed by the Germans, the Nazis, during the war. And my grandfather was one of the ones who helped rebuild it because he was a builder. And here's another picture. So, has anyone here been to the Campania region? Has anyone been to Naples? When I say Naples, Campania region, Amalfi Coast, Island of Capri, Pompeii? No one? Oh. Oh, okay. Well, I'm very excited about the Pompeii exhibition. I really encourage for you to all go there. I was actually going to give a lecture at the National Museum, but just things kind of went a bit out of control with work. But the Pompeii exhibition is very powerful for me because there's some resin figures of some of the people who underwent a lot of trauma as the ashes came down from the volcano. So if you can go there and visit it, I think you'll find it amazing and pay respects to those figures. They're not actual bodies, they're resin filled in cavities, but it's quite, for me, it's quite distressing to see it, but it's very powerful. Anyway, this is, so the Campania region, we have a lot of things to be proud of. Vesuvius is our reminder to not take any day for granted, because she's actually active and she can blow at any moment. We invented pizza. Our ancestors invented pizza. So when Queen Margherita from Spain came to Naples, they invented this pizza, and it can only have cheese, buffalo mozzarella cheese, tomatoes and basil on it. And to be a pizza in Naples tastes, you can go to any other part of Italy, it won't taste the same. Neapolitans won't eat it in other places in Italy. It's that good. There's actually a registered association of Neapolitan pizza makers, and there's one in Canberra. You know the one, Solito Pizza? Has anyone heard of that one? Yeah, that one I noticed on their sign, they are registered, but there's no other in Canberra. Malfi co-founders, but our coffee is also very unique, and we're very famous for the espresso, which Neapolitans and Italians drink all day. And we have Pompeii, and I do hope you can see that exhibition. And there's also an Italia festival on the 12th of April, so that's coming up. So both my parents came from, around Naples, there are 5 regions. A lot of Canberran Italians, I've noticed, come from Avellino, but my mother came from Caserta and my father came from Benevento. Probably the same distance from Canberra to Goulburn, about an hour, they're villages, but they met in Sydney. And that was quite lovely because my mother had about 4 brothers and sisters, and they all married. One married an Aussie, one married someone from the Abruzzo region, etc. But because they married in the same region, they speak the same dialect. Each region of Italy has a different language. It used to be different kingdoms. And then Italy was unified, and they chose the language of Dante's Inferno, the Florentine language, to become Italian. So we learn Italian at school, and that's what they present the news in, but each one has a different dialect. The Neapolitan dialect is particularly beautiful. I'm very biased, but it has a mixture of Spanish and French and a little bit of Arabic in it. And there's a lot of very famous songs. O Sole Mio, do you know that song? Sung in the Neapolitan dialect. There's another song. Yama, yama, coppa, yama, yama. Yeah, that is about the funiculare, which is a diagonal train that goes up Vesuvius. So anyway, it's very famous, our music. So this is the onset that my mum came in with her brothers and sisters and her dad, and there was a second journey her mum came. And when we work with people from refugee backgrounds, we know in our work that trauma is not just the trauma of the country of origin, there's also the trauma of the journey. And there's also trauma that is related to integrating into society. So what happened on that boat, my mum told me, they were not used to eating, they didn't have a lot of food. So they get on this boat and they couldn't believe how much food there was. There's just this food, and so they're eating it all, and they're stuffing it in their pockets when the waiter would turn around, and then they go back and they'd shove the bread rolls under their pillows. And next morning, voila, they couldn't believe it. It was just, you know, has anyone had a cruise, been on a cruise, those buffets that, you know, yeah, they could not believe it. And they were crying, they missed their village, they missed their friends, but I think they knew that this sunny, hot place they were heading to, the famine, the lack of food was going to stop. And that's a real adjustment for a young woman who had never travelled before and didn't speak English and didn't know what to expect. We mustn't forget, if we're going to talk about trauma, there is trauma in the migration journey. Okay, time for a pop quiz. Which Australian Prime Minister also travelled to Australia on this boat, the Oronsay, the same one that my mother came to Australia on? And there's a little prize, and I'll tell you now, probably melted and recently to find in my car, but there is a prize. Nope. Nope. I'll give you a hint. He used to be the politician in the Northern Beaches where I grew up. Don't answer. No? Sorry? Yes. Right. Your prize. It's something we used to eat growing up in the 70s. Oh, no, it's not. I thought they were wagon wheels, but they're not. Cart wheels. I hope they're okay. Oh, yeah, he was a 10-pound pom. And actually, I should have added something. Then it would have placed the age. There's something I had to add. He came to Australia on this cruise liner in 1955 as a little baby. So that was, I think it was like 3 years after Mum came. Yeah, Tony Abbott. Sorry. He was born in 1957. He arrived on the Oronsay in 1960 as a 3-year-old baby. So Mum came 5 years earlier as a young woman in 1955. That is my 9 degrees of separation with Tony Abbott. I actually told him that. I saw him at something and I said it to him. Anyway, he also held the seat of MacKillop on the Northern Beaches where we are. There are other prime ministers who are migrants. Did you know? Julia Gillard was also known as 10-pound pom. Like she came as a baby as well. Anthony Albanese, actually it's a bit of a sad story. I think his mother was English and met his Italian father in England, and they came on one of these cruise liners, and then she fell pregnant and this is terrible. He said, oh, no, I've got to marry someone from my village or something. And so they were never together. And Anthony Albanese, out of respect for his mum, did not see his father until after she passed away. So, interesting story. So this is a picture where they got married. Randwick. There used to be a famous restaurant, and they're like seashells on the wall. Has anyone ever heard of that restaurant? Near Peters of Kensington. Yeah, there was a restaurant near there. That's where they got married. And her and her sisters made that dress. So, and also the going away dress. And they used to love dancing. So let's picture them dancing in the 70s. So then my family came along, and that is a picture of me. So this was probably taken in 1972. And my older brother and sister. I'm the youngest, and my brother Joe and my sister Anna was the middle child. We were a very loud, happy, typical Italian family living in Annandale. I don't know if you know about Annandale. Does this look a bit familiar? I'm the baby. This would have been taken in 72. What side of the Harbour Bridge was it on?
Looking east from the west.
Yeah, the Luna Park side, maybe. Yeah. Do you like the cars? Anyway, so that's a picture of us there. Mum was probably taking a photo. So this is us in Annandale. It was a great house. It had a lot of fruit trees at the back. The toilet was in the back, so you had to go out the back. An outhouse, is that what it's called? And we all lived in the same room. We all had the same bedroom, and I slept in a cot till I was 7. And yeah, we were really loud. And this is how, and they rented out the top part of the house. And it kind of seems a bit strange, you know, like we're a very working class Italian family, but we're very happy. That's all we knew, you know. And Annandale was a great place. It was full of Italians. It was full of migrants from everywhere. That's my brother Joe. So I gave Dad a heart attack when I told him that he bought that house for $15,000. Do you know how much a townhouse in Annandale costs today? Before he passed away, I said, oh, you know, it's probably worth 2.5 million, Dad. And he goes, shut up. No, it's probably worth 3, over 3. So yeah, it was just amazing. It's a very different place. So this is a picture of me with my dad. I was very much daddy's girl. And my father would work 7 days a week as a plasterer. He'd go all over Sydney, but he also came to Canberra. And he knew the roads of Sydney, like the arterial roads of Sydney, like the veins on the back of his hand, before sat-nav. And they just work everywhere. And when my brother got older, he left school in year 11 and he worked with Dad and he helped him. So even though he worked so hard, I never remember him as an absent dad. He was always there for us. He was a great dad. He would pump asbestos all over Sydney. Goodness knows how he lived as long as he did. Asbestos was one of those things that either it got you or it didn't. Or they'll find fibres in people's lungs and it might get them later on. But he did die of lung cancer, but he passed away when he was 83. So I don't think it was that. So here's a picture that I found of the library being built. It was built in 1963. Prime Minister Robert Menzies announced the near completion of working plans for a new National Library building. The present library building was opened on 15th of August 1968 by Prime Minister John Gorton. The building situated in Parks was designed by the architectural firm of Bunning. And here's another photo, you know, I like to imagine Dad was somewhere there. So what's the relevance of this? First of all, as I said, sorry, gosh, there you go. Don't play around with things. My parents were very smart people, but their education was sadly interrupted during the war because of poverty. So like many migrants, they were really wanted us to be educated. I remember my mum told me at 5, your dad wants one of you to go to university. It ended up being me. He worked 7 days a week. And my dad used to read a lot of books on political, you know, usually shonky politicians in Italy, from Italy. Some Italian families growing up wanted their daughters to get married as fast as possible because that's what they did in southern Italy. But not my parents. They were quite feminist and they were like, we want you to go to university. I have a number of degrees. I have no HECS debt. My father paid my full law degree and I'm so grateful for that, how my parents supported me. My mum used to cook steak at exam time because she said steak helped your brain cells work. So they both were really smart and supportive. And my mum was known at school for a love of poetry. They paid for us to go to the best private Catholic schools in Sydney. I went to a place called Monty, St Angelo, in North Sydney. Absolutely love that school. And paid all my law degree. So my sister, she ended up being she's a very good artist, accomplished artist. And my brother worked with my dad. So as we were in Annandale and on the weekends, Dad had bought this little plot of land on the Northern Beaches in Cromer Heights for $5,000. And we would go there on the weekends and because Dad was working on the house with his friends. We were really excited about a big Italian mansion, had about 6 bedrooms, it was amazing. We still have it. We're in the process of selling it, but it was double brick. And every single wall was double brick, which is very rare these days. In winter, it was very warm. In cool, it had terrazzo. Have you heard of terrazzo floor? So we're mega proud of this terrazzo. I went to have a drink with friends at Monster Bar, and they had the exact terrazzo, except this one had green filling. Ours had like pink. Anyway, it's really cool now, terrazzo. We're a very loud, happy Italian family. But the difference was, we lived in this cul-de-sac, and in the cul-de-sac We were the only Italian family. In the Northern Beaches back then, there weren't a lot of Italians. So my sister, she used to get off the bus and she'd come home mortified. She'd go, you know, I could hear you guys screaming all the way down the street in the bus stop, you know. Now, Annandale, that was normal. But you start to stand out when you do that in the Northern Beaches of Sydney. We had all the Italian things, tomato days when the family would get together and puree cooked tomatoes. My wedding was, you know, my last day as a single woman was at the house. I had my communion, family dinners. It was really, we were so proud of our house. And in 1979, when I was 7, we moved there. So there's a picture of me and my sister, my brother. And it also gives you a little picture of the decor. We had velvet wallpaper and velvet curtains and, you know, it was all kind of very nice. And that's another picture of what it looked like. But we were very proud of our house. Yeah. What is that style of furniture, Louis? Yeah, like really kind of gold ornate. That's what a lot of migrants at that time really aspired to, velvet couches and paintings. Anyway, so, but it wasn't all easy. I'd like to introduce you to a man called Mr. Barton. His name was Richard Barton, and he lived with his family in the cul-de-sac. And he was the CEO of a Vinnie's, I think. He was also a practicing Catholic and a CEO, so we had that in common. But we soon began to stand out as a family on that cul-de-sac. And we were I don't like that word wogs, because to me, we want to talk about trauma. Everyone thinks it's comedy, and I don't like it because I remember those days when I was called it constantly. We would get called that name a lot. We were the outsiders. The children didn't want to play with us. Some of them would get really nasty, and no one ever did anything. None of the adults. Except Mr. Barton. One day, do you remember firecracker night, the Queen's birthday? You could buy, they'd light up the firecrackers and throw them at our house. One day, all the little boys were just chucking rocks at our house. And Mr. Barton went to everyone on the cul-de-sac and knocked on the door. Hi, can I have a chat with your son? Okay. And he collected all the little boys and he said, go up the hill of the cul-de-sac, pick up every single stone now. And the little boys did it, including his son. The other thing they loved to play was knock and run on my mum, constantly. When Mr. Barton found out, he sat his son down and said, this is unacceptable behaviour. His son told me this later on. Unacceptable behaviour. Put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel if this was done to you? Now you go by yourself to their house, you knock on the door and you apologise. And Andrew did. There's a bit of trauma on the other end. One day, gosh, my mum would be arrested for this. One day she got so fed up, she took out the feather duster and whacked one of them on the back of the necks, and we're like, knees, and I'm like, Mum, you can't do that, you know. But she just got so fed up. Anyway, so I had to apologise to Andrew for that. He said, look, I'm so sorry, we were so mean to all of you. And I said, no. But Mr. Barton was the only adult who stood up and said to his child, you don't treat people like that, you know. That was traumatic to me. Being the target of racism is a traumatic thing because you get the impression that you're not good enough, you don't look right, you don't fit in, your food's not right, the way you talk's not right. That is a trauma, and it takes a long time to get over it. One day my dad was driving, he was in a car accident, and he pulled over to give his details to the other driver. And the other driver got out and said, you bloody wog, why don't you go back to where you came from? And my dad goes, see this road here? I built it, so I get to stay here. Now, he didn't build a road, he was a plasterer, but it was a metaphor, it was an analogy that he had made his contribution, so he should not be subjected to that racist abuse. And I think that's a pretty good comeback. He could have punched him, he could have sworn at him, but he didn't. He said, I've made my contribution. Now go. In 2020, I moved to a town called Bendigo, and I was the CEO of a similar organisation to the one I run now. This organisation helped people from refugee and migrant backgrounds. And I learnt that 6 years prior, you see, Bendigo is one of the most undiverse towns in all of Australia. And so what happened is one day the Muslims that lived in the town said, we would like to build a mosque, and they put in an application to council. And some of the people in Bendigo got really upset. And then people from outside Bendigo, neo-Nazis from Melbourne, people from Townsville, etc., came in, and there were riots on the streets of Bendigo. Did anyone hear about the Bendigo riots when they happened?
Yes.
It was a very sad time. It was sad because most of the people who rioted were not people from Bendigo. This went all the way through council. Council was being overrun. People were just going wild in the streets. They had the horses from Melbourne and the police and everything. It went all the way to the High Court, and the High Court said this application is approved. And I believe that they're about to do an opening of the mosque in Bendigo. But I can actually understand how this happened. I don't know if you know this, in country towns, there are those who stay and there are those who leave. Would you not agree? And the people who leave go to look, like in Migrant, for jobs and opportunities. But the people who stay, they might not have travelled much, and they turn on their TV and they see people like ISIS, who represent nobody, beheading people and doing horrific things. And they're the only Muslims that they've ever had any information about. And it's easy to say, look, we don't want this war here. Even though those people on TV represent a minuscule percentage of the population. That was a huge trauma. And I talked about this at the Bendigo Interfaith Council. And someone came to me at the end and they said, Sonia, we just want you to know that most of the people are not from here. But sadly, this little town, it's not a little town, has to bear the shame of that terrible time, dark time in its history. So I need to say that. That was traumatic. Here's a picture of my cousin. She's one of my best friends. And my daughter Sophia, who's 18 now. And my cousin reverted to Islam. They say revert. Muslims say revert. They believe you all originally Muslim. Anyway, and married a Lebanese man from the north of Lebanon, Tripoli. And we're very close. And she has found it tough because she does bookkeeping work for her family's business, and she's also been a stay-at-home mum, raised 4 lovely children, and she's also the daughter of migrants. Her father's Michael de l'Aquila, and he was my mum's brother. So there's diversity that comes to us even on a family level. I like this photo of me with Anna, my cousin, and her 2 daughters, wearing an ACDC t-shirt. Now, my husband and I had an argument. I told him, my husband's English, I said, ACDC, that Australian band. He said, not Australian. I said, well, what are they? He reckons they're all Scottish or something. Can anyone solve this puzzle? ACDC, an Australian band. Thank you. They probably migrated to Australia and became famous here, didn't they? Yeah.
One of them used to wear a tartan skirt, Angus.
Yeah.
And that might be right.
Yeah, I think some of them might have been born in Scotland.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, we had a big argument about this. Thank you. I'm going to tell him that. I want to look that up.
One of the things that Australia thinks anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like pavlova.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love this because here is a very Muslim young woman and she's wearing an Australian icon. I use this in cultural competency trainings because it just smashes a stereotype. You don't expect it. So they live in Punchbowl. Did you know Punchbowl is the nearest point from Canberra entering into Sydney? So when I go to Northern Beaches, it's 3.5 hours to go to her house, 2.5 hours. So I get my coffee there and then I continue my journey. So this is the problem with long settled migrants. Sometimes when people have been around for a long time, they start kind of getting comfortable and then they start saying, well, no one's kind of hassling us anymore. Let's start hassling those people over there, and they become part of the problem. And that angers me. And I've seen it in the Italian community when they start turning around against Arabs and Muslims. And I say to them when I hear it, now you have short memories. I don't have short memories. I remember what we went through. You have to stand up for them because no one stood up for us. We must help those who come after us to settle in and feel like they belong and supported and not become part of the problem. Community stereotypes. Used to be wogs, no one really says that anymore. Now it's terrorists. And the immigrants, the Italians and whoever starts using, oh, they're all terrorists. I say to them, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, not part of the trauma that people are going through. What I want to say to all of you, including myself, be a champion, be committed to supporting people who come from different backgrounds. Don't just sit there, do something. If you see, you know, sometimes in Sydney, there's like racist attacks on the bus when someone gets on raving drunk and starts hurling abuse at someone, racist attacks. And I used to think, what do I do? If I say something, I'm going to get punched in the head. I did some bystander training and they said the trick is to just role play in your head what you're trying to do, what you're going to do, make eye contact with the person suffering the abuse, get help from the bus conductor, make sure they're okay afterwards. There's lots of things we can do, but don't turn a blind eye when you see racism. It's against the law. We have an act also in the ACT and federally. Be like Mr. Barton. And you say to me, look, come on, Sonia. We've got problems. Interest rate keeps going up. Taxes from overseas go up. Everything's going up. We have our own problems. Why should we bother? Financial review. In the absence of a higher birth rate or productivity growth, we're not producing enough babies, which means doing more of existing capacity across the economy. Australia will need an ongoing stream of working age migrants like never before. Official numbers show this, that there are about 7 workers supporting each pensioner in 1979. Now it's shrunk to 4. And then predictions it will halve by 2060. We are heavily dependent on migrants. If anything, we should be thankful. You need population growth for the economy. Isn't that right, Robert? Presuming you're an economist. Yes. You know so much, I just thought you would be. What are you talking about, Sonia? Okay, there was a very interesting scheme, the PALM, Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme. And it allowed eligible Australian businesses to hire workers from 9 Pacific Islands and Timor-Leste, where there are not enough local workers available. Do you remember during the pandemic, they were getting people in from the Pacific Islands to pick cherries and everything? These people helped the economy continue and still does that. So there's programs like the PALM. Yes.
During COVID.
We wouldn't have had much. I didn't know that.
No,
Are you really?
But 100%, we would be really short of food without palm workers during.
Thank you. We should be grateful to people who are supporting, who helped us get through the pandemic. Now they're being supported to do legal action for harassment and discrimination that they've experienced on the job. What a payback. That's terrible. We need to support people who come, and they help us and we help them. Snowy Hydro, a lot of Italians on that. I had an uncle on that. Began in 1949. This is like the big success story of migration. 60,000 migrants from over 30 countries, 65% of workers, mostly southern and eastern, I should say European. It is a demonstration of the successful integration of migrant workers into Australian society. So I think the Snow Hydro, it's quite near here, isn't it? It's not too far. About an hour?
2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah, I went and saw that big monument that's there. So what other contribute? And the children. So this is my sister's work, Anna Di Mezza. You want to look her up? She's amazing, really amazing. She's always painting these kind of quirky, weird pictures of vintage families. I love this. This to me is about climate change. You know, they're having a picnic, and meanwhile there's a bushfire. You know, she should have sold it to someone. I've got that one in my living room. She gifted me this in my first CEO job when I was the CEO of a domestic violence organisation. And I love it because there's no mouth on the woman and there's no numbers. And to me, as a human rights lawyer, that picture is all about advocacy. It's about vulnerable people, particularly women, not having a voice, not being able to, you know, speak out. Here's another big deal, the Karen of Neil. Has anyone heard of the Neil? It's Neil. It's a place near the border between Victoria and South Australia. So there was this town called Neil. There is a town called Neil, and it had this duck factory, and it was like Formicula. It was not doing well. They didn't have enough workers, and then they started bringing a few families who helped in the factory, and more people, Karen people, came. Now in Bendigo we have Karen. Karen are a minority of Myanmar or what was known as Burma. Here in Canberra we tend to have the minority of the Mon, which is another group of minority people being persecuted. So they kept coming, and they just revived the town economically, that particular factory and the whole town. If you want to know more about it, Australian Story, that's a refugee community, but that is an example of the contributions that people make. Okay, did you know that the great-great-grandfather of Sir Donald Bradman was Italian? Emmanuel Danero, also known as Nietzsche, so it's probably German as well, was one of the first Italians to migrate to Australia in 1926 in the DNA. So, Sikhs, we've all heard of the Sikhs. Sikhs come from a part of India, a lot of them come from the Punjab. And one of their tenets of their faith is humanity to others, supporting others. And every time there's a crisis, they show up. The pandemic, food, they were delivering food to people, bushfires, floods. The Sikhs are always there. They're surf lifesavers on Bondi Beach. Really wonderful people. Let's go a bit locally. Canberra. Does anyone know Stasia Davalsky? Do you remember? She sadly passed away. This woman used to sit in Garema Place in her van, ladling out vegetable soup to people. And she had escaped, I believe, persecution in Poland. And when the van broke down, there was a big drive to raise money. I believe she won ACT Citizen of the Year. She was in her 90s still doing that. Talk about contributions, an amazing woman. And what do I think is the key to understanding and belonging? I believe it comes via the bridge of food. Now, you probably all eat some kind of Italian food. Did you know that in Australia in the 1950s, tell me if this is true, the only spaghetti anyone ate was canned spaghetti,
Yes.
right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Was it with that sugary tomato sauce thing? Now we have an amazing coffee culture, particularly in Melbourne. And it saddens me to reflect that in 2006, Italian used to be the second most widely spoken language in Australia. Now it's Mandarin. I'm not saddened because it's Mandarin. I'm saddened because it's no longer in the top 5 because our people are getting older and dying, you know. But it was quite significant once. I remember someone told me a tale on the northern beaches of Sydney. The Italian fishermen used to fish alongside the Aussie fishermen. And they'd say to the Aussie fishermen, listen, can you not throw that animal back into the water? And the Aussies would go, sting. And so they give it to them. Now, tell me, is there one pub in Australia that does not serve calamari on the menu? We've become part of the furniture. And I have cousins in Italy that have never eaten Chinese food. This is an unknown thing. In Australia, tell me, do each and every one of you have the family Chinese restaurant that you all go to for people's birthdays and anniversaries? We did, right? I couldn't believe it. I know adults in Italy who've never eaten Chinese food in their life. So this is, in Bendigo, we had this thing called, not the National Multicultural Festival, but Zinda Festival. And we would showcase the cuisines of communities that you might not have eaten their food, like Afghans. That is the key. You kind of eat some of the food and you think, oh, that's okay. That's good food. They get to stay. That's one of the keys. Sorry, it's a little bit cold. So, how the children of migrants help shape Australia, our best kept secret. So they continue, they do the education journey and implement the dreams of their parents. They often become doctors and lawyers and builders, and the legacy of their parents goes on. And I believe that the children, I think you were saying this, and I agree with this, the children are the key to successful integration because they become the advocates. They're the ones, especially if they're native speakers of English, who can speak on behalf of their children, their parents, who can understand, who navigate 2 cultures, and then they bring that into the workplace. I speak 7 languages to different degrees, and the reason why was because if you're listening to more than one language growing up, it's much easier, and your brain develops in a different way. You can learn languages quickly, and you can navigate cultures quickly. All of my staff are culturally diverse. They're very good working with diverse clients. So these are, they are the key. I remember growing up, my parents, when they'd speak to Aussie, sometimes the language was way up there. And my parents would get this glazed over look and they'd go, And I would recognise the glazed over look in clients. I know when people don't understand. I know how to bring the language, not dumb it down, to simplify it so that people can understand. And that comes because of how I was brought up. So what I want to say is the children of migrants, either born here or born overseas, they're the keys to helping migrants to settle in. For example, these are my staff members. Josh came to Australia. Couldn't speak a word of English. She now speaks fluently. Came when he was 14. He's one of my team leaders. Madhuri, she came out about 5 years ago. Didn't speak much English. Living under the Taliban. She went to Dixon College. She's now in University of Canberra Law School. So I had to get her as one of my staff team. She's amazing. Madhuri, she's my business manager, CPA qualified. She doesn't let a cent go unmonitored in my organisation. We had a multicultural youth summit and the Governor General is a patron of Mars, so she came along. Oh no, this is what happens when you walk around. I'm not good with the technology. So you're going to say to me, hey Sonia, we're just going to be this big mess of nothingness and the Australianness will go out the window. I disagree. Over a third of the population were born overseas and over 50% of Australians have one parent born overseas. My parents had ended up living longer in Australia than they had in Italy. And I remember when we were doing a tour with some American Italians of Italy, and those Italians had a slight American accent, and I realised that as thick as my parents' Italian accent was, they also spoke English in a very Aussie way. They'd become Australians. See, in the 50s or earlier, there was this white Australian policy. You come to Australia, you lose your citizenship, you have to be Australian. You have to abandon everything. I don't agree with that. I am 100% Italian and I'm 100% Australian. I am fiercely proud of both. I have lived overseas as an aid worker and the wife of a diplomat. And I can tell you now, the Aussies I met in India did not stop being Aussie and said, right, I've got to learn the language, I've got to dress. No one does that. You can't deny who you are. You can learn to be an Aussie. We're not going to be a massive nothingness. We're going to have a massive, wonderful cultures and people being Australian and being proud of their culture. They are not mutually exclusive. That is my belief. With my dad at the War Memorial. And it was really funny. I don't know if you know this, but Italy was on the wrong side of the war. And my dad was patted on the head by Mussolini, one of the the leader of the fascists. And we went to the War Memorial, and there was this big stall of Nazi memorabilia, and I had to kind of. He goes, oh, I remember this. He wasn't kind of worshipping it, but he was like, wow, I remember this. It was all very familiar to him because Italy was also bombarded by the Nazis because of the resistance. And yeah, so, but anyway, that's my dad at the War Memorial. Wearing a digger's hat. So what I say is, what do we do? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask people about their cultural background. I've asked people that. I say, look, I'm an Italo-Australian. Can I ask what your cultural background is? It's not a rude question. But just be aware of your unconscious stereotypes. Work with the person or communicate with the person in front of you. Put the stereotypes aside. Not every Italian eats pasta. You've got to find out about the person in front of you. Make an effort. We had an Iraqi family move in next door. That was so nice. I used to go over and practice my Arabic just to entertain them. Be curious. Be interested. Want to learn to share. Food, as I said, is a great connector, and it's a great way to learn different languages. So I came full circle. My parents used to go to this house they bought in my mum's town, and my mum got sick on her last visit there. And she seemed to know that she started saying to everyone, I'm going to die here. I don't want to go back to Australia. I want to pass away in my town. And she did. Took everyone by surprise. She's 79. And then 6 years later, Dad got lung cancer. And I saw he was getting sick very quickly, so I brought him from Sydney to Canberra. And he passed away in our house. And then after the Catholic funeral, I took his ashes and brought him back with Mum into their town. So they came full circle. They had a wonderful life in Australia. They came back to Mum's village. And us Catholic Italians, the daughters usually clean the tombs of their parents. So when I go every year to the village and stay in my house, our house, I always go and prepare it. And, you know, there's so many connections. This is my second cousin. One of my aunts, my grandmother's sisters, migrated to America. We could have been born in America. Probably I would have looked very different. But anyway, and I met a whole truckload of I came into contact via the internet, and we met in Naples. That's in Naples Station. And I brought them to my cousin Elaine and her husband to Formicola. They couldn't speak a word of English because the Italians that migrated to America migrated earlier, and they were told not to speak Italian because of the racism. So the next generation that came later didn't know any Italian. So I had to interpret for her. And I felt, how blessed was I that I had learned Italian, Neapolitan at home and learned proper Italian at high school.
Beautiful portrait, that one.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
I really like it too. Can you see we're cousins?
Quite lively.
Don't you think we could see we're cousins? Yeah, I really like it. It was the first point that we'd ever met. We'd all, you know, and it was lovely. I studied Italian so hard for my HSC that I came second in advanced Italian in the Year 12 exam in New South Wales. That's how well I know it. My cousins are like, you speak Italian. Like, I have this Aussie accent when I speak Italian, and I love it because I go into a bookstore and I ask for something, and the whole store turns around and they go, why do you speak Italian so well, but you've got that strange accent? And it's a real, I used to be really ashamed of it. I was like, really wanted to have no accent, but I love it. It's a conversation. People just come up and talk to me. They're like, how do you speak like a textbook Italian, and you've got this Aussie accent, you know? So it's actually a great thing. And that's us at a Chinese restaurant in the it's in the Blue Mountains with my brother and my daughters. And if you want to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn, they're active. And this is me and my family in Stonehenge. It was a freezing, I love history, I love Stonehenge. My husband's English. Oh, don't worry about that. But that is the end of my talk. It's a happy story. There is trauma of it. But one of the things I read in the email that you sent me, I should have done more reading, was that trauma, Jung argued that trauma can help uncover unfinished questions or issues that had happened in the past, but it can be a way of creating a more wholesome life or personality or positivity can come out of trauma. And I think that's what happened with my family, my parents and myself. Do you like that lead into Jung? The relevancy? Did you think that was all right? So that's it. I guess I've talked enough. Thank you very much for listening. Absolutely. Well, when I'm driving around Punchbowl in Sydney, one way I learnt to read Arabic in the Middle East is when the driver's driving by, and you know, I try and read the sign before the traffic lights changed, and I can still do that in Punchbowl. Like I'll be driving around and the signs are in Arabic, and I'll be like, oh, you know, my cousin can't speak Arabic, and I'd say, oh, you know, that sign says this, and you know. So yeah, there are enclaves, and for the Italians it was Annandale, Leichhardt, Haberfield. The Greeks it was Marrickville. You know, it's kind of normal. Think about it. When Aussies are overseas, they tend to kind of all hang out together, but yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the Second World War had a huge effect on people coming from overseas.
Yes.
I come from the Riverina.
Oh, okay.
Griffith and that area. And a lot of the Aussie boys from the farms and that were killed in the war. And then the migration of the Italian people came into the area. At first they were farmers in so they're all connected. Now it's interesting to see the culture changing in that Afghan people from other countries, Asian people are coming in on that mix, which is quite interesting because originally there were the Italian people moving into big industry, like producing wine, like the Bortley wine and the big wineries.
I see a lot of synergies in regional Australia. Like, for example, in Bendigo, there was a community of Afghan people, and in their country, that a lot of them were like country people. So, you know, that they'll work in different things. And they also had very similar, and the Karen in Bendigo, similar approach to the Italians. They know nothing about the share market, but they know buy one house and then buy a second house, and that, you know, like really simple mathematics, and then, you know, very similar principles to kind of getting by and you know, growing their family. So yeah, there are differences, they probably wouldn't work in alcohol, like wine producing for the Afghans, but that hard work ethic is there. Mm. Yep.
And then, and for the second generation, the Italian people, they became quite ambitious. So it became a very big, wine producing area as well as rice.
You can tell an Italian house, they don't grow flowers. They don't get that. They're like, why do these Aussies grow flowers? You can't eat them. You know, it's got to be, if you can't grow something that you can eat, you put some concrete down. Is that right, Robert?
You see that at Dixon, actually. There's
Yeah.
Trellises of tomatoes all through the front garden.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When my grandparents were pioneers in the Refugee in the area, the Italian families would come to visit, and they would say, well, be rather perplexed to say, well, what's this rose bush doing here?
Yeah.
Rice and vegetables. Why are vegetables growing in this area?
Griffith is an interesting area because it's got both northern and southern Italians, and they've been known to fight. But I'll never forget going to, is it Townsville, far north Queensland, and I was giving this talk, and I mentioned I was of Italian background, and these women at the end, they came up and they said, oh, that was a nice talk. We're Italian too. And I looked at them, I said, you're not Italian. These women were like 7 foot, big blue eyes, blonde hair. I'm like, you're Aussies. And they're like, nah. I said, no one looks like that in where we're from in Sydney. And they go, no. Our ancestors, our people came from the Veneto, the northern Italian region of Italy, near Venice, and to do the sugar cane. And it's quite interesting because the north of Italy has an influx of ancestry from the Germans, so they tend to be fairer, whereas we're more mixed with Arabs and Spanish and, so that was quite funny. I said, come on, I can't imagine you people ever had any racism the way you look. I mean, they looked really Aussie, but it was lots of diversity, even within countries. Yeah. Oh, no, they do like, yeah, absolutely. Like if you go to Italy now, there's, lots of flowers. But I think the post-war generation, because I don't know about your parents, but because they hadn't had a lot of food, flowers are not the priority. You just need to survive. So, yeah, but that's true. People are more focused on things change, don't they? Oh, okay.
And he came to Canberra and I thought, oh, great, I'll be able to show paint my garden. And because I was very proud of my garden, he walked into the front yard and went, why have you got all these plants here? You can't eat any of it.
Yeah. That's the only question. Can you eat it?
Yeah, can you eat it? So I went,
yeah.
Very different sort of perception. So every now I've planted hedges in my garden. I go, I shouldn't have planted an edible hedge, not a. So I've started planting edible hedges rather than just ornamental ones because
Prickly pear, that's actually quite edible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about prickly pear. That's an interesting fruit. We used to love that. And my dad, the prickly pear, that cactus, in Italy, it's called Indian fig. I don't know why. But anyway, so Dad, you had to cut it a certain way so you didn't get those prickles in your hand. And for work, I was driving around with my operations manager throughout the Loddon Campaspe Central Victorian region, and there were a lot of, they're called wheelbarrow cactus, and it's a complete menace. It's a pest of a plant. Like once it overcomes farms, it just destroys everything. So yeah, and I could imagine some Italian, even though the wheelbarrow cactus is a different it's a different thing, but there was another fruit we had in that backyard in Annandale. I wonder if you've eaten it before. In Italian, it's called nespole. I think in English it's called leocut. liqueur or something. Thank you. Is that how you? I've only seen it red. It's like a yellow. Yeah, we used to love that. Yeah, that's a very Italian thing. And the other thing, and I think Australians share this. Growing up, we ate some really weird, disgusting things. Like my dad loved livers and brains and things like that. And you had to eat what was on the plate, right? So when I go to strange places, not strange places, where the cuisines are a little bit, I always try it. I don't have a problem trying things. Not like my English husband. He went to China and they gave him this sea urchin and it was all, and he goes, I'm not going to eat it. I don't care if I'm a diplomat and that if I just can't eat it. But I'll always try things. And I got that from my parents. And I think Aussies who went through the Great Depression, like parents and grandparents, they would eat. And I saw this in South Sudan. We're very wasteful with the animal these days. But in South Sudan, when they'd cook something and they went through a war and a famine, they'd cook everything, the bones, the guts, the intestines, And I think when you're going through hard times, you don't waste the animal. Even in China, they will eat parts of the animal that we probably wouldn't touch. We've become very wasteful now. But my dad used to love pig's feet, boiled, and you put salt and lemon on it. Really disgusting. That was his favourite thing in the world. Does anyone have Aussie parents who used to eat kind of strange things like that? Yeah. Like tripe. That's an Aussie thing, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Was it any good? But I think Aussies share that with them, just not. I don't think Italians would eat some of that stuff now, but yep. Yep. Or they'll eat things in Thailand like grasshoppers. They're very high in protein and really helps Italian. What really resonated, this man came from a very poor part of Argentina. 80% of Argentinians are Italian background, actually. And that name, Diego Maradona, is a very Italian name anyway. But anyway, he came from a very poor area and he really clicked with Naples. And there was a documentary, and I think it just sums up the racism in the country. He went to play with Naples against Juventus in Milan, the gods of the Italian soccer scene. And he's there, and the crowds were screaming at these Neapolitan soccer players. Get a job, go wash your face, go back to Africa. And Diego goes, gosh, I didn't know Italians were so racist. And then they played Juventus, the gods, and just, he was like a knife through butter, just cut it, just won it. Won the European Championships, the Italian, like he just brought Naples like a shining star. And just watching that documentary, I teared up a bit because it really reflected the racism that is prevalent in the country. It's just vicious. Our people looked on like we're peasants, like we're nothing. We're full of the mafia. We're this and that. We're draining the north. And it's true, we have economic problems. We do have problems of organised crime, but we have a different culture. We are very, can I just exemplify what I mean by a funeral? This friend of mine, he's from the north, and his mum died. And his mum happened to be a client of mine when I was the Deputy CEO of ADACAS. And he said, Sonia, would you do the eulogy at my mum's funeral? Sometimes I get asked to do eulogies. So when my mum died, I did the eulogy in the church in the village. And I said the whole eulogy in Italian. And the whole audience stood up and clapped like we were at an opera. I was shocked. That's not normal. They were really proud that I had honoured my mum. I told her whole story in Italian. Anyway, so I'm at this funeral in Australia for this Italian northern woman who used to be my client, and her son and wife were good friends of mine. So I gave this eulogy and I talked a little bit about Signora and how I knew her. And at the end, there was this deathly silence. And I was like, oh no, I've disgraced them. I'm so ashamed. They're really going to be upset with me. And I was walking out, and the deceased woman's sister came up and said, or niece said, thank you very much, Sonia. That was a really wonderful eulogy. Someone else came up. And then I was really scared of my friends, and they came up, they said, we so appreciate that you did that. Here's a gift. Thank you. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I'd offended them because I was so quiet. They loved it, but they express themselves differently. You know, just, it's not normal, but the last funeral before that was my mum's, and people were applauding and crying, the whole church. We are much more emotional. That's why when I go to places like the Middle East, I'm at home, or Afghanistan, I know how to talk to people. I'm not confronted because I'm quite an emotional person. I can just blend in the crowd because I even look like them. So that's Southern Italy, and it's an amazing place. It's got Pompeii, it's got Amalfi, it's got, you know, Sicily is amazing, desserts, etc. The north is amazing, Rome, Siena, Venice, Florence. They're all so different, but they need to be together as one country. So I feel very strongly about this because we cop a lot of racism. That's why I always ask, have you been to Naples? People stop at Rome and then they go home. No one wants to go to the south. It's better now. When I first went to Naples, we were 16. We lived in this apartment my dad inherited in the Spanish Quarters, which was the equivalent of the Bronx. No one went to Naples. Naples was a dirty city with rats jumping around. We loved it, but no one would go to Naples. It was dangerous. I went there last year. I brought my uncle. I said, come on, let's go to Naples. I was shocked. It was completely different. It was packed with Americans, Germans. The streets were clean. It was just vibrant. You weren't scared that people would rip your gold necklace off. It's a different, it was everything I dreamed for Napoli. It's a different thing than what it was in 86 or 87 when I was there. And I feel very passionate about this. And I really hope you all go to Napoli because there's no other place. Anyway, shall we wrap up? You probably already got to say.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, absolutely.
You've got two lovely daughters.
Yes.
Who we've known somewhat for many years. They always used to sit at the same place in church, you know.
Yep, yeah. And I'm still sitting in that same place in church, yeah.
What's their self image as being of migrant Italian origin, do you think? You know,
Well, yep.
They mess with holes in the knees and so forth.
You remember that? You remember that? Yeah.
Like anyone else
Yeah.
in that generation, you know. And I think probably they're a bit familiar with the use of a mobile phone, you know.
Yep. I think they are too.
Yeah.
Look, when Sophia, my eldest, who's 18 now, was a baby, I would talk religiously in Italian. And then when the youngest one grew up, I'd do it a bit and then I kind of take it off. So the eldest can understand Italian now, even though I speak a lot less of it with her. The youngest doesn't know that much of it. Sophia, I can see the more Italian aspect. She's got that temper bit, that feistiness. She went to a job interview at some coffee shop. Well, she was working in that. The guy said, you're very Italian, the way you use your hands, the way you talk. And so there's those aspects that come through. And they also look a little bit Italian. Jenna looks more English, but she's got the dark eyes. But yeah, they're conscious of their culturality and their diversity. And I think they're proud of it. But, you know, it kind of gets a bit different with each generation, with each parent who's from a different culture. But we're also proud of our English heritage.
Have they taken on the Italian language?
Sophia can understand it. I stopped talking it as much as I think I just got a little bit tired thinking. But yeah. So Thank you. Gosh, it's late, isn't it? Thank you for listening to me. Oh, thank you. Am I? Do you like this message stick bit? I love it. Do you think I should continue this in my training? I did an anti-racism with primary school kids. I think they liked it.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Sonia.
Special for us.
Anytime.